Christy, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's 9 Lives and Party on the Farm. So I've stamped those images out on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. And I'm going to be coloring to match some pattern paper from the Simple Stories Celebrate 6x8 pad. So I will tear out the sheet that I want to use as my color inspiration and tuck that under my cardstock panel. And I'm also going to pull out some reference images of cats that I colored in a previous video. So if you missed that video, you can check that out. I showed you all kinds of different ways to color cats using different patterns and prints and color palettes. So I'm going to keep those off to the side to refer back to and use as inspiration as I color the cats for today's video. So I'm going to start with this first little kitty in the bottom row, and I'm going to do a tuxedo cat for him. I'm going to use N5, N7, and N9, starting with the N9 and carefully laying in some shadows. This is a very dark color, so I only want to use a little bit of it. A little bit is going to go a long way, and then I'll start to blend that out with the N7. But I'm keeping in mind the pattern that I want to do on the face and chest. I want to leave almost like a diamond pattern of white. So I'm going to carefully color around the area that I want to leave white. So then I'll come in with my N5 and I'll bring that color in a little bit closer, bringing that in around the eyes, and then pull that color together on the chest area where I want that to come into a little V, and then fill in the rest of the body. I did leave some little white socks on the front and also the tip of the tail. I did want to smooth the transition between the gray and the white just a little bit, so I brought in the N3 and just colored right over the edge of that N5 on the face and the feet and the tip of the tail. I also threw a little bit of that into the ears. Then I'm going to move on to my second kitty, and this one I'm going to do W00, W11 with E70 and E71. This is going to be a little striped tiger cat. So I'm starting with the E71 for my shading. And this one I want to leave a little bit of a white patch on the chest and right around the muzzle, like a little circle shape around the muzzle. So I'm keeping that in mind. It's good to think about the areas that you might want to leave white when you're coloring cats or dogs or any other type of critter that has multiple shades. Think of that in advance so that you can plan that out. So now I'm coming in with the W1 and creating that circular shape around the muzzle, filling in the hindquarters, but leaving that white chest like I said. And then I'll bring in just a touch of that W00 to transition from the gray areas into the white so that they also have a little bit of shading. And I'm going to do some tiger stripes on this one, so I'm going to go one shade darker with the E74. I like to start with my first stripe right above the nose so that I can make sure that I'm doing it even. And then I go on either side and then also along the cheeks, and then I'll do the back and along the legs and also the tail. And I'm just doing like elongated triangles, almost like a slice of pizza or a slice of pie, just like a long triangle, using the very tip of that marker to make sure that those come to a little point. And just add that to give him a little bit of texture and interest. The next kitty that I'm going to do two different colors of patches, of large patches. So he's going to be like a tri-color kitty. I'm going to start with his brown patches, and for those I'm going to use E21, E23, and E25. So I'm going to do half of his face in brown. So I'm starting with that E25, laying in those areas, some along his back and on one of his legs, blending that out with the E23. I decided to add another little patch on one of his other legs. So I went ahead and put that in. And then I'm using the E21 to kind of soften the edge of those brown patches into his white fur. And then I will also add some brown to this kitty's tail, starting with the darkest toward the body and then blending up toward the tip. For the other half of his face, I'm going to use E74, E77, and E79. So he will match with the other tiger kitty because I also use some E70s there, but I'm going quite a bit darker for these patches. So I'm just picking and choosing again some areas that I want to have with this darker combination, laying the shadows in with the E79, blending out with the E77, and then I'll come in with the E74. The E74 though is still quite dark, so I did soften that up with some of the E71. Just pulling that color out a bit and making it blend into some of the brown patches or some of the white patches. And then I even brought in just a little bit of E70 to just further smooth that transition into those white areas. I felt like he needed a little extra shading on the white areas, so I brought in E000 and added some of that into his ears on the lower part of his face and along his legs and belly. The fourth kitty, I'm going to do like a little patchy tiger stripe in like a golden tone, but I'm going to start by shading in the white areas using W00 and W1, and then letting that fade into the white cardstock for the highlight. And then I'll come in with my golden tones, which is going to be Y11, Y35, and Y38. And I'll start to add that in different little patches along his body. I'm going to do the top of his head in this golden shade, and then I'll do a patch along his back and arms and the fronts of his legs and a little bit on his tail as well. And then I'll pull that out with the Y35, just making that color a little bit softer and a little bit richer. And then I'm going to also bring in the Y11, which is going to really brighten this combo up. And I'm making like a little, almost like a circular shape toward his nose. And then just blending out those areas along his back and his legs and tail. And then I felt like his face just didn't look quite right to me, so I decided to add some little patches on his cheek area as well. So I just went back with the Y38, blended out with the Y35, and then it added a touch of that Y11 in there. For his tiger stripes, I'm going to go with orange. So I used YR04 for that. And just did it the same way I did the other tiger kitty, just adding the stripes right over the nose first, and then on either side evenly spaced along the cheeks, the arms, the back, and the tail. Now I do wish that I had gone with a slightly less bright orange. Maybe the YR02 would have been good. I feel like the orange stood out in a much starker contrast on those golden yellows. I could have gone with some richer yellows as well, more of like a brown earthy yellow, but I was trying to match the yellow stripe in that pattern paper, so that's why I went a bit more bold. I did use the E000 to add a little bit of warmth to the white areas because he just wasn't looking right to me. But in the end, I decided to just go back and do an extra layer of the Y38 and the Y35 to kind of soften those stripes a little bit more and just make them look a little bit more part of his fur instead of standing out so stark on top. And then I'm going to do my mouse using some E50s. I used E51, E53, and E55 for him. I wanted him to be very different in tone from any of the cats, so that's why I went with these shades. And just added the E55 first, blended out with the E53, and then added a bit of the E51 in the highlighted areas. And I did go back and do a second layer of those darker colors because I felt like there just wasn't enough contrast there for me. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to give all of these critters some rosy cheeks, color in their noses, the insides of their ears. I'm using R11, R20, and R22. So for the rosy cheeks, I started with the R22. I also filled in the cat's noses with the R22. And then I'm going to go right around the edge of that and blend that out with the R20 to soften that. And then I'll also throw a little bit of that R20 into the ears. And this is an extra step you don't have to do if you don't want to, but I think the rosy cheeks really make the critters seem more alive and just really kind of festive and fun for a birthday card especially. But I always give my critters rosy cheeks because it's just such a fun touch, I think. Makes them just seem a little bit more human, which of course they aren't, but that's how I see it. So I did add that to the mouse as well and colored the inside of the ear that's facing us because that would be the ear that shows the inside. And then I kept the R22 and added in the R24 and the R29. And I'm going to do this little ribbon or collar that's around the cat that's lying down, his neck, and also the little bow off to the left side. The next color I'm pulling from that pattern paper is aqua, so I'm using BG10, BG11, and BG13 for that. And I'm doing the yarn ball that is in the orange tiger kitty's paws and also the body of the little fish toy. Then I'm going to switch up to kind of like a purplish pink, and I'll use RV63 and RV66. So I'm doing a little RV66 first, blending out with the RV63, and then I did do a second layer of those just to increase that depth and saturation. Next I'm going to do yellow. I'm going to use Y13, Y15, and Y17 to try to match the yellow stripe in the pattern paper. And I did the little pom-pom on the party hat and the flame on the candle. Then I'm going to do a softer pink using R000 and R11. I did the frosting on the cupcake and the face of the little fish toy. And I did do a couple layers on those as well. And then finally I'm going to match the base of the pattern paper, that blue, using B24, B26, and B29 for the ribbon around the gray tiger kitty's neck. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to bring in a black gel pen and get that going off to the side. And then I'm going to go over the eyes of my kitties and my mouse, all of the kitties that have their eyes open, so not the one that's lying down. And this just makes them bright and shiny, which is another extra step, but again, it just really brings the critters to life, I feel like. And then I'm also going to bring in a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen, and I'm going to add some polka dots to the party hat. And I tried to squeeze in like a little stripe on the birthday candle, but it's such a small little area, it was kind of hard to see. I did some little scallops on the turquoise part of the fish's body, and then I trimmed these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm starting with a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock. I'll take some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink and press that onto an acrylic block. Then I'm going to take the Hello Bluebird Gallery Frame number 6 die and line that up over that cardstock panel, and then I'll do a simple watercolor background in each of those 3 windows that the die leaves behind. And I'm laying that ink in rather messily. I always think that the messier the better for these types of backgrounds because it leaves lots of little areas where the ink is lighter or darker, and it just adds a lot more interest than if you were just to paint the whole area, you know, in like a single layer. I'm also going to go back with a little bit of that extra ink and dab on some dots in a few spots to increase the saturation, and then I will just set that aside to dry. In the meantime, I'm going to go back to that Simple Stories Celebrate 6x8 pad and choose another print to use with that stripe. There were a couple of good options, but I decided to go with this confetti paper. So I will take that Hello Bluebird Gallery Frame 6 and I will die cut that out of both of these pieces of pattern paper. And that is going to give me 2 separate frames, 2 outer pieces and 2 inner pieces, plus a couple little extras that I can save for another project. So I'm going to swap out the inner and outer frames. So technically you could make 2 cards at once if you wanted to, but I am just going to use one of these today. However, I will put both of these frames together. I'm going to use some regular Scotch magic tape, the same kind of tape you would use to wrap gifts or anything like that. And I will add that to the backs of the frames. I just measure out a strip the size that I need, and then I tear it in half so that it fits behind those frames, and it tapes those 2 frames, the inner and outer pieces, back together so that they can be used as one unit. And I will do this for both of the frames. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use at this point. I like to wait and see when I line it up with the background, which one I think looks best. And then the other one, I just tuck inside the little bag that I put my pattern paper pad in once it's been opened and used. And I keep it in there so that I can remember where that frame came from, and then I already have a frame ready to go for another project. Then I'm taking the Jane Small Alpha dies and spelling out the word happy onto some hot pink cardstock. I believe this is MFT Poppin' Pink, but I will have it linked down in the description bar below with all of the other products that I'm using. So once I've die cut all of those letters, I'll just set them aside for now and pop the dies right back in place on my die sheet. I always clean up as I go so I don't lose anything, and also so everything is all picked up by the time I'm done. Then I'm going to pop that background into my MISTI, and I will line up those die cut letters in the center section. Make sure I have those spaced how I want them. I want to do this part first before I stamp the rest of my sentiment so that I know how much room I have to work with. And I decided that I might want to swap out the A for the little mouse and use him to represent the A instead. So I added him, and I really liked the way that that looked, so I'm going to keep him there. So now that I've got my letters lined up how I want them, I'm just going to grab those with my EK Success reverse tweezers. I'll add some liquid glue to the back of those with my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue, which has that super fine nozzle, which I love. You guys recommended this to me a couple of years ago when I asked, and I am so grateful because it has become my favorite glue. So I will just continue working my way from the right to the left, picking up those letters and making sure that they are lined up as straight as I can by eyeballing. You could grab a ruler if you wanted to really make sure that they're on there straight, but I'm not that particular. I just like to eyeball things and keep it simple, and as long as it's basically straight, I'm happy. So it is a handmade card after all. So once I have all of those letters in place, I'm going to grab my sentiment, and this is from the Party on the Farm stamp set. I'm going to line up the exclamation point at the end with the Y in happy above, and then I'm going to mask off the word happy with a little bit of Post-it tape, stamp that down with some VersaFine Onyx black ink, making sure to remove the mask in between. I have forgotten sometimes, and that can make a big mess of things. And then I just repeated that process to stamp it down a second time to make sure it was nice and bold. And then I'll pop that out of the MISTI and set it aside. And I will add my card base, which is Lawn Fawn Ballet Slippers cardstock, and I'm stamping in plastic flamingo ink. I'm doing the little kitty holding the fish toy and the sentiment, another birthday not possible. Now I'm going to check and see which of these frames I want to use on today's card. And I decided I liked the one with the darker blue outline on the outside. So that's the one I'm going to use. I'm just removing those foam tape release papers that I've added to the back, lining that up so that the center one is, perfectly spaced. And then I will add some liquid glue to the back of this whole panel and add that to my card front. It's going to cover the entire front of the card, so I'm just lining up those corners and making sure it's nice and straight before that glue dries. Then I can bring in my images and lay out my kitties how I want them to go. So this is how I originally had it in mind, but then I realized that the two kitties that were kind of lying took up more space in the bottom section, and then the two kitties that were sitting up took up less space, and then visually I just didn't like that. So I decided that I was going to have to swap one of those out. But I didn't decide that until I had already adhered the yellow tiger kitty. So he was kind of stuck down. Once I realized that I wanted to switch them, I did try to lift him up, but he was really stuck down there. So I decided to swap out the other two, which does kind of bother me a little bit, I'm going to be honest, because I would not have put the two tiger kitties next to each other. I would have colored them differently if I had realized that I was going to swap these to different sections, but I think it's fine. I think it still ended up being really cute, and why shouldn't the two tiger kitties be next to each other? I just like to spread the prints and patterns around the scene, but I still think it ended up looking pretty cute in the end. I mean, it's adorable kitties. How can it not? So I'm just popping all of these kitties up with some foam tape, just sticking a little bit behind them wherever they are going to be in the recessed area, and then the part of them that is overlapping the pattern paper, I did not use the foam tape behind. So now I'm just figuring out the accessories. I knew that I wanted the red bow to go with the kitty with the little red collar. And then I've got the cupcake and a party hat and the little fish toy. So I'm just figuring out the best placement for all of those things, and also seeing which items might have to be popped up, like the cupcake and also the little fish toy, because those were going to go in the window area. And then the party hat, decided that I only needed like a tiny little bit of foam tape to support the area where it would be kind of between the cat and the pattern paper. So I just tucked that in there and then used liquid glue for the rest of that. To finish this card off, I wanted to add a little bit of Stardust Stickles to have a bit of glimmer, since this is a celebration card. So I added some to the pom-pom on the party hat, the little bow tie, the bottom of the letters in the word happy, the fish, and also the frosting on the cupcake. And that is going to be the end for this one. So I'll lift that up to the camera so you can see all of the detail and give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button. You can leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you never miss a video. All of the products I use will be listed and linked in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.